You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. The Options Insider Radio Network is sponsored by Fidelity Investments. Fidelity's Option Trade Builder tool can help you confidently build an options trade in 3 simple steps. Just choose a strategy, select a contract, and then review the benefits and risks of the trade. Learn more about Option Trade Builder at fidelity.com/options. Options trading entails significant risk and is not appropriate for all investors. Certain complex option strategies carry additional risk. Before trading options, contact Fidelity Investments by calling 800-544-5115 to receive a copy of the characteristics and risks of standardized options. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE SIPC. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody, that music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program where we break down everything going on the other side of the derivatives fence. So we're going to talk some Bitcoin. That could be the cash, the futures, the options, the growing universe of all the different products and indices and trackable things therein, the SKEW, the vol, the term structure, all that good stuff. Of course, my name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-exciting The Options Insider Radio Network, and I'm here to break down all the fun stuff going on in the world of crypto, particularly in the world of Bitcoin volatility. So I think without further ado, let's get right to it and dive right on into the crypto hot seat.
Forget about cold storage. It's time to turn up the heat on thought leaders from the world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time to take their place on the Crypto Hot Seat.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Crypto Hot Seat. This is the portion of the show where we welcome on guests from throughout the world of crypto and proceed to pick their brains for the benefit of you, the listener. And next up in the hot seat, old friend of the network, even though he hasn't been on this program pretty much since the inception, all the way back in January of this past year. So back in the early primordial ooze days of this fine program. He's our old friend, Mr. Simon Ho, the CEO over there at T3 Index. Simon, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown program, sir.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm glad that I was part of that primordial ooze.
Yes, you can put that on your CV there. I was part of the primordial ooze of the Crypto Rundown program. Well, listeners may be familiar with you from your regular appearances these days on our Volatility Views program, where we talk all things spikes and index volatility out there. But you're on here today to talk about something related, yet a little bit different. You know, people have been asking us for a while, Simon, now that, you know, Bitcoin is really kind of taken top of mind, generating a lot of mind share out there. And the narrative is floating out there that Bitcoin is extremely volatile. It's a very volatile asset. You know, the inevitable next question is, when are we going to get a Bitcoin VIX? When are we going to get effectively a Bitcoin Fear Index? Well, sir, I do believe you are here to answer that question, sir. So tell us, what the heck is this BITVOL index you've got over there, Simon?
Well, yes. So it's very, very exciting. We, as you know, we develop volatility indices in general, but also indices of other kinds. And we're quite close with the folks at Lacuna Capital, who have a very impressive business in Chicago. They're formerly Aussies, which is how we know them. And we teamed up with them because we thought, well, you know what, it's time to have a real volatility index like the VIX and like spikes, but for cryptocurrencies. So we targeted the biggest one, which is obviously Bitcoin. And so they are OTC market makers, one of the largest in the world in that space, in Bitcoin options. And so we partnered with them. So they provide us with the data, and we calculate, we accept that data, and we basically vet it, make sure it looks all good, and put it into the model, and out spits the number. So it's just like a VIX, I guess, but for Bitcoin. It's been going since October of 2018. You can see it on t3index.com. We have just upgraded the index yesterday, so might want to give it 12 hours. We just got a couple of tiny little tinkering things to do, but it's really good. I mean, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is becoming more and more important. More people are scrutinizing it and looking at it, and so now you have a realized volatility index in the form of a spikes and a VIX.
Yeah, so walk us through really quickly without getting into too much of the weeds. I know we have interesting minutia for things like the spikes with the price dragging to avoid, various, shall we say, issues that have arisen in the broad index and VIX market over the past couple of years. So without getting too deep into the weeds there, sir, to reveal a secret sauce, walk us through effectively how you put this thing together.
Yeah, sure. So it's not wildly dissimilar from other indices. We use an approach called the simple variance swap. So we equally weight the strikes. We find that to be a superior version than a typical variance swap. So what that means is we take a look at a continuum of options, all the way from the lowest put that we can get all the way to the highest call. And then we simply weight them equally, and we get a 30-day measure of, we interpolate between the two nearest to give us a 30-day measure of implied volatility on the Bitcoin. On Bitcoin. So it's really quite simple. It's not wildly different from the way that many of these indices are created. But of course, this has entirely different properties altogether, which makes it pretty exciting because, if you look at the level of vol, I mean, since we've been calculating it, I think the low in vol has been in the order of 45. The high has been closer to 190, I think it was. So actually, not one. Implied vol high was a 135, but the realized vol got to 190. So yeah, there's a lot going on here and a lot to unpack.
Yes, I'm looking at it right now. We're at about 107 and change. Is that correct, sir?
On the realized, yes, that's right.
That puts us firmly at the middle to upward portion. Looking back at this chart, actually, now we have gapped up, and so things are moving. We'll get to all of that a little bit in the Bitcoin breakdown. There's a little bit of volatility going on out there. But Simon, you said you've been calculating this now and disseminating it for quite some time. I'm curious, this is obviously, as we've said before, and I think we even have a listener question about it later. Bitcoin has this perception of being just the most volatile thing that has come across the markets in quite some time. It's more volatile than a crazy biotech or some of these other esoteric things that you always associate with volatility out there. And I'm curious, now that you've been actually crunching the numbers for the better part of a year out there, what's your take on all this? Is it as volatile as people think? Is it, has it been any surprises for you? Any interesting takeaways as you've been crunching all this data, sir?
Yeah, when we first started looking at it just over a year ago, I kind of felt maybe it's a new product, it's very exciting, new entrants coming in, and that volatility would ultimately sort of peter out a little bit and sort of reach some sort of level that might be more consistent with the other things that we're used to. I have to say that that's not been the case, to be honest. There's quite sustained volatility in this thing. And for now, I don't see that disappearing, to be honest. I still believe that it's relatively nascent. I mean, obviously, we've got CME and bakkt coming out with new products. Those sorts of things, as they become more liquid, would tend to dampen volatility a little, I would say, just because, the volatility is exacerbated by the fact that it's not super liquid. The more liquid the thing becomes, then the more reliable the indicators are, and typically volatility subsides. But for now, and as of the past 14 months, no, it's not any lower today than it was when we first started it.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting impression that has been out there. I've joked in the past that shows like Silicon Valley and others have made all sorts of jokes about the inherent volatility of Bitcoin. It's just an accepted thing out there in the public that Bitcoin is the most volatile thing that they've ever seen out there. Speaking of the numbers, I just want to clarify something you said really quickly. You mentioned kind of the implied and realized indices. Are there two BitVols you're disseminating right now, one for realized and one for implied, or is there just the one? Clarify that for our listeners. I don't want to be any confusion out there.
Yeah, sure. So as I said, unfortunately, you have to give us one extra day just with the migration of the website. But on the website, you will find, as of tomorrow, you'll see the implied volatility. That is currently on there, I believe. And there will also be, I thought it would be quite useful to have a realized volatility there just for reference sake. We also have the index calculated in two different ways. One is just using end-of-day prices, and the other is with real-time prices. So you'll see three different versions of it. Unfortunately, today you can only see, I think, one of them. But by tomorrow, all of that will be resolved.
Hopefully by the time the podcast goes live, folks will be able to see all that. Right now, if you go to T3 Index, just the letter T, the number 3, index.com, listeners, click on the BitVol. You look at this chart, you'll see it's had an interesting range over the course of the past year. But check it out for yourselves, listeners. T3index.com is the place to go. You can see the range of BitVol, all that other good stuff out there. We got to keep on rolling, though. Simon's going to join me as he parse some more of what's going on in the world of all things crypto as he dive right on into the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trading activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we surprise, break down what the heck's going on in the world of the leading crypto asset out there, a.k.a. Bitcoin itself. We're going to talk the spot, we'll talk the options, we'll talk the futures, we'll talk all that good stuff, the vol, the SKEW, all that good stuff. Coming into showtime, we did see a little bit of a downturn, just a few hours ago, earlier today when we were starting to prep for the show. We saw Bitcoin was off around 300, I handled about 350 from where it was this time last week, about 360 or so. And then coming immediately into showtime, we saw the worm turning a little bit again to the dark side with Bitcoin selling off about another 200 handles, putting it off around 550 from where it was last show. Right now, it's ticking right around 6,900, almost exactly out there right now, which puts it off actually about 200 on handles from where it was just a few hours ago. So the worm turning a little bit recently. Not seeing a lot of news driving exactly what that is. We saw the usual slate of news hitting the tape this morning. A few arrests out here, some news out of China. Nothing really earth-shattering. That seems to account for this near-term sell-off, but again, it doesn't take much to drive Bitcoin a little bit in one direction or the other. The high of the week we saw coming during showtime effectively last Monday, right around 75.5 or so out there was kind of the high. And the low coming into the showtime was a little bit north of 7,000, about 7,040. Obviously, we've since broken that. We're down around 6,900 right now, so that would be effectively where its low is for the week now. And of course, speaking of lows, Simon, it seems like a long time ago, but in reality, it was only almost exactly a year ago to the day. It was December 15th of last year that Bitcoin finally bottomed out. And people might think, well, that's weird because, I remember the crypto winter kind of ran on into Q1 of last year. And you're correct, it did. The malaise kind of lingered for a while, but the actual bottom of the print, the bottom of the tape there occurred on December 15th of last year. It hit 3,122 on that day. And of course, we all know what happened since then. Coming into showtime, it was up 127% from that level. It was north of 7,000. It's come off a little bit, obviously, since then, so it's probably around 120% or so right now. So it's been net a good year for crypto, even though we know the last 6 months or so have been marked more by a little bit of bearishness to the downside than the upside that people hoped would continue throughout the course of the past year. Simon, it's been fascinating to watch the ups and downs of the Bitcoin marketplace over the course of the past year. I'm curious for you, did you notice any interesting evolutions out there in your BitVol as we transitioned from that Q1 period, which kind of marked the end, most people think, of the crypto winter, that bear market period, and then we transitioned into that run-up, we saw in the middle of the year, and of course, the worm turning yet again. Did you notice any interesting evolutions in your BitVol index over that period, sir?
Well, I guess it has been very interesting to follow it. I mean, as you mentioned, we had been a pretty amazing year. We started at 60. The high, I think, was we mentioned just earlier 135 or so, and it's come all the way back down to 72. So, I guess as the asset class matures, it's inevitable. I think that with more players coming in, as we mentioned before, with the exchanges as well becoming more active on both the futures and option side of things, I think it's inevitable that the volatility of this should probably decline. Also, the more participants come in, I think you'll see that as well. I mean, a year and a half ago, it was very nascent, and I dare say volume was a lot less, and so it's easier to sort of move it around. That said, I mean, the thing is still incredibly volatile. I mean, with the most recent update, in the order of sort of 73 or whatever, it's not an unvolatile asset class. It's still very, very volatile. But I think over time, you probably will see it start to decline somewhat.
Yeah, and speaking of volatility, I'm looking again over at this your realized vol index here you sent over. Again, you should be able to find it hopefully by the time you listen to the podcast. If you're listening live, not so much. It's only updated through October right now on the T3 website. But hopefully by the time the podcast goes live, maybe we'll hold on to a little bit to make sure everything's live when it goes out. But looking at the spikes we've seen out here, it's been kind of fascinating to see. Looking at the highs, we're threatening the 200 level out here in this. In fact, looks like it hit that a couple of times. In January of this past year was kind of the first time the BitVol realized version actually hit that level, and then looks like we threatened it again recently, not quite to that 200 level, but looks like it got close to that in kind of the wake of all the madness coming out of China and all, remember we moved over 1,000 handles over the course of that week, listeners, so obviously a lot of vol coming in there as well. Is that your take here as well? Looks like, Simon, that the BitVol kind of topped out in January around 200, and then we kind of flirted around some peaks around 150. Several parts during the year, listeners. I'm sure you can probably guess what periods those were where we threatened those, and we kind of rallied close to 200 again over the course of this recent Chinese, I guess, dust up, you can call it, for lack of a better term, before it came off pretty hard again, back to where it is right now, a little bit north of 100. Is that pretty much your take on it for the year as well, Simon?
Yeah, it is. It's quite fascinating, actually. You see, there's probably at least 1, 2, 3, 4 major sort of peaks, I guess. Even if you look at that middle of the year section, there were sort of 2 instances where it got to, say, 130, 140 sort of level. So quite fascinating. And certainly for now, there's no perceptible drop off in volatility in general. I mean, that's very clear to say, I think.
Yeah, people might think there would be a massive annihilation. We saw a little bit of come off, obviously, after the China news was filtered out and processed in the marketplace. But lately it's still frothy, as you could probably see why. There's a lot lurking out there, known and unknown unknowns out there in the vol space. Speaking of Bitcoin volatility, a lot of this data, again, we got parse now coming from our friends over there in SKEW land, SKEW.com, place to go. They got the right URL these days, no more SK3W. So you can check it out there for yourself. If you do that, you'll see the 30-day realized. Looking at, they pull their numbers, I think a lot of it from the Deribit platform, the Deribit Options. It's down to about exactly 50% from about nearly 54% this time last week. The implied was down about 1.5 from last week. It's ticked up over the course of the past hour or two, as you might imagine, as we've seen a little bit of a downturn in broad Bitcoin levels. So it's pretty much almost unched from where it was last week. It's only down about half a point right now at about 59.5%. In terms of the big days for options volume over the course of the past week, there haven't really been many since the last time we checked in. Remember, we used that roughly 30 million notional as kind of our barometer over there for an active day on Deribit. We only hit that level a couple of times over the course of the past week. On the 8th, they hit about 33 million, and on the 12th, about 31 million. So no massive prints out here or massive spikes in volume to really accompany some of the swings we've seen over the course of the past week. It's kind of a quiet week. And again, this is getting towards the end of the year, so maybe not surprising that we're seeing things get a little bit thin out there. In terms of what we did see over the course of the past week, the big prints, again, mostly is coming from Deribit land. There wasn't a heck of a lot. We've been talking about 500 lots and more of late on the show. This week, the biggest contract size print we could find was about 180 contracts. These were the D67 half puts going up when Bitcoin was just threatening. Actually, today, this went up today when Bitcoin was starting to threaten 7,000 to the downside, about 7,088. Someone looks like maybe picking up some 67 half puts. Can't really argue with that intention. Again, we don't see the sides, so we don't know for sure. But it looks like they probably were maybe buying these. Also seeing a print of about 160 odd of the Jan. It wasn't all puts. It was the Jan 8,500 calls going up. Those were, let's see, on the 10th, so a few days back. For 166 of those when Bitcoin was a little bit higher, 73.30 out there. So some Jan upside, some D downside, and then of course we still have our flurry of D 7,000 puts. Someone likes those, 100 of them going up on the 15th, 100 again going up on the 16th. So maybe someone flipping those, even though Bitcoin hadn't really moved, only about 10 handles in between the 2 days. So interesting stuff out there. Again, not a lot of size to parse for us out there. Term structure wise, vol pretty similar to where it was this time last week. Haven't seen a lot of evolution in that. Remember, it briefly got very backward when all the Chinese news was hitting, but then that's kind of come in. And since then, the slope has changed a little bit, but not markedly so. The call to put, speaking of unchanged, is almost exactly unchanged from where it was last week. It was pretty much a coin flip, 50-50 calls versus puts. That's pretty much exactly what we're seeing right now again this week, exactly at 50%. So not a lot of change down there, even though the net OI has come off a little bit. It was almost 450 million. That was on Deribit last week. That's down to 435 million. The open interest at LedgerX, the other sizable platform, and it's obviously a lot smaller than Deribit. They're at about 38, so a little bit shy of 40 million. They've come off a little bit over the course of the past week as well. If you look at where that OI is aggregated, you'll see most of it still in the December contract, the end-of-month December contract. That's pretty much where all the action is. It's nearly 40,000 contracts open out there now, so that's been dominating the tape for a while. That continues to be the case coming into the end of the month. Before we get into the futures, you kind of mentioned, Simon, earlier, some of the other products that are coming online. We have bakkt. We'll get to those in a little bit. We have CME options coming online, hopefully, in a couple of weeks in mid-January. Are you excited by the prospect of these coming in there? Because you kind of touched on it earlier. You're mostly relying on the OTC prints you're seeing from Akuna now. Do you think some more listed options, pun intended, out there, will that maybe help solidify what you're seeing on the OTC side and also perhaps make BITVOL even that much more accurate?
Yeah, I think so. I think by definition it has to. You get more interested parties. More people can trade it because it's listed. OTC is obviously not for everybody. You need to have the balance sheet. You need to have ISDAs in place and such. So it just makes it more challenging. So the more open the architecture can be, the more I think you will see that it will prosper. One of the things, as we touched on earlier, was that volatility is probably likely to decline, though, somewhat. Which, for people who love volatility, we like to see Bitcoin vol. I mean, it's part of the attraction of trading is its variance because it gives people more opportunities. Obviously, more opportunities to lose money as well if you've got it wrong. But the point is that I think that this is only good for the business. I think that there are a lot of people in the wings as well. If you think about product creators, everybody's trying to get that, Bitcoin ETF up and running as soon as they can. So I think there's a lot of interest in this in general. I don't see it going away as much as maybe some regulators are hesitant about it. I think that this has got a pretty bright future, and with those two big exchanges being involved, that's only going to improve liquidity.
Hey, we heard rumors yet again on the Volatility Show this week, Simon, that there's the specter of potentially a new XIV coming. So if the regulators could potentially get their heads around the return of inverse volatility, then maybe they can wrap their heads around some crypto volatility products as well. Speaking of crypto products, let's look at the Bitcoin futures. Let's start in CME land. A decent day, decent week, not a lot of paper lighting it up. Coming into showtime, it was about 4,000 contracts on the tape over there in CME land. Remember, that's a 5X coin, so you're talking about 20,000 coins changing hands out there. So a light day. We know they're capable of a lot more out there. Bakkt futures, similar story. Again, all you asking about bakkt volume, I encourage you. Follow that bakkt volume bot. It's a great follow on Twitter. Just the facts, ma'am. It's great. Just the numbers. They're not affiliated, as far as I can tell, with bakkt in any way. They just like crunching the numbers. So more power to them. Coming into showtime, there was about, looks like 75 million worth of volume, which puts them off about 8% from what they've been. Actually, I'm sorry, this is the weekly summary here. So 75 million there. That was down 8% on the week for the futures. Again, these are their bakkt monthly Bitcoin futures out there. People ask about the options. I haven't seen a lot of concrete, hard data about the options yet. So either they're not really disseminating it or they haven't done a lot. Either way, I don't have a lot to really report yet on the options front. I know everyone was excited. They're listing a Bitcoin option over there. It seemed a little early, but hey, c'est la vie, crazier things have happened. So we're still seeing the futures kind of gain traction, so I don't imagine we're going to see a ton of the options yet, but hey, time will tell, and once we see the CME contracts listed in January there, maybe there'll be some interesting cross-pollination of the two, and maybe a rising tide will lift all boats. Meanwhile, though, it's time for us to keep on swimming right on into the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, let's get to it. Altcoin time. By the way, Simon, I know you got the BitVol going on. Obviously, that measures the volatility realized and implied of Bitcoin. Have you played with, have you toyed with any additions on the altcoin realm yet, sir, or is that still in the hopper over there?
Oh, interesting that you should mention that. I don't know if you have some ESP or not, but yeah, we're likely to be working with a Chicago-based crypto specialist company to branch out, so ETH and a bunch of other things, actually, that we've got lined up. So watch this space. It should be pretty interesting.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. No little birdies whispering in my ear at all. That was just pure curiosity. I had a feeling. I know you enough to figure you'd want to at least have your toes in those other waters as well. So it sounds like that is the case. So we'll look forward to that. I'm curious. Some of these altcoin are pretty volatile, so I'd be very curious to see how these all, when you start crunching the numbers, how they all play out. Speaking of the numbers, let's start with ETH, the clear number 2 out there in the altcoin universe out there. Rough week for ETH. As Bitcoin has turned to the dark side, so has ETH. It was threatening right around 148 on our last show, and coming to showtime now, it's at about 131.25. That puts it off over 16, nearly 17 handles from where it was this time last show. So not a good period for the ETH bulls out there. We know you're out there. Let's look at some of the numbers, like some of the crunch, some of the vol, courtesy again of our friends over there in SKEW land. 30-day realized, which is interesting. Again, this kind of speaks, I think, to more of the thin nature of the options market. The 30-day realized is unched at 58%. It's been unched for a while, so I think that's more of an issue with a lack of a lot of data, really, than the fact that the realized vol isn't really moving. Maybe once we have Simon's indices to compare, we'll know for sure. And then the 30-day implied, that has come off a little bit. That's down. It was about 75, almost 76% last week. This week, down to about 71%. So vol coming in down a little bit here in ETH land. Call to put, that is down quite a bit, especially when you look back to where it was a couple of weeks ago. Remember, we were remarking on the show about a month ago or so when we first really started tracking the ETH open interest and volume and all that fun stuff, that it was pretty much all calls all the time. It was about 91% call to put. That has come off to down to pretty much almost what we're seeing on the Bitcoin option side, which is close to 50-50, about 55% on the call side. Some of that, remember last week we talked about a pretty sizable print. I think it was in the it was a D straddle, I think it was last week, and we saw similar prints going up out here this week in sizable. The biggest print of the week, actually. Well, there were two. I think one of these is related. Well, maybe not. They went up different times, so I probably shouldn't assume, even though they seem related. DEES 140 and 130 puts going up 500 times each this week. Once on the 16th and once on the 12th. So a little bit of time between them, but they do seem like similar paper. That probably is one of the contributing factors to why the call to put has plummeted so aggressively out there. Worth noting, though, it wasn't all puts all the time. 1,000 lot of the June 180 calls also went up this on the 10th. So almost exactly a week ago. That was when ETH was at 145. So interesting prints out there. Obviously, some of this playing with the call to put, but that 1,000 lot apparently not enough to nudge the call to put back up to where it was. OI down a little bit. It was about 41 million last week. Now down about 37.5 million or so. So roughly a tenth of what we're seeing on the Bitcoin options, what we're seeing on the ETH options in terms of net OI. So obviously a much smaller marketplace. 19,000 is still the big chunk of it. And that's in December. That's leading the tape out there. Still a lot of love for whatever reason in that 600 strike. It must be someone must have a pretty sizable legacy print, legacy OI open on that 600 strike, because it's been top of the food chain out there for quite some time. The 160 strike also pretty active, pretty popular, but it can't quite seem to topple. It's pretty much tied with the 600. So I'll have to go back in time and dig and see when that 600 print went up, because it's been open for a while. So clearly someone has or had an interesting upside interest axe to grind out there in ETH land. Let's move on to Ripple, another one I know a lot of you out there keep looking for with interest. Unfortunately, this isn't the week with a worm turned out there. Down another about 2 cents or so. It was about 22.5 cents last week. Now it's up 20.5 cents coming into showtime here. So off another 2 cents out there. The lingering malaise out there continues to impact our old friend XRP. Litecoin, same deal, down about almost exactly 5 handles. It was about 44 3/4. Now it's about 39 3/4 coming into today's show. So a little bit of the malaise continuing out there in Litecoin. Same deal for Bitcoin Cash, down about 13, almost $14. It was threatening 209, about 208.5 on the show last week, and now it's about 194.5, a little bit north of that as well. So down almost $14 from where it was this time last week. So a lot of interesting stuff, mostly to the downside out here, unfortunately for you altcoin bulls out there in altcoin land. But I want to make sure before we go, we squeeze some of you folks in. So without further ado, let's keep on rolling into your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, Simon, I hope you put on your question answering pants, sir, because we got some questions to answer here. Let's see how many we could squeeze onto the program this week. Let's start with the Silver King. The Silver King wants to know, what are you hearing about bakkt options? Well, I kind of mentioned this at the top of the show. Not much yet. I wish I had a lot of volume. You know, again, we want all these products to succeed. The more volume they're doing, the more options, pun intended, you guys have to trade, and that's better for everybody out there. So right now we're not hearing a lot out of the bakkt options. They kind of announced them with great fanfare, but there wasn't a lot of commensurate volume data to go with it. In fact, when this question came out before showtime, I tried digging in myself in the few minutes I had before the show, see if I could find anything for you, and I couldn't really see much. So I don't know if they're not disseminating it yet or if they haven't really printed much, maybe a combo of the two. But either way, I wish there was more. Silver King, you'll be the first to know, as well as every other listener of the show, when we see and hear more about bakkt options. Maybe, like I said, maybe when the CME options go online in a couple of weeks, maybe that will drive some flow in both of them. But for now, not hearing a heck of a lot. But we have our ear to the ground and hoping to hear more. All right, Simon, this is right up your alley here. This next one comes from Tedeschi. Tedeschi wants to know, how does Bitcoin volatility compare to other major asset classes? Well, if only I had someone on the show, Simon, who has this sort of data and constructs indices of various other asset classes with which to compare. If only I had that person with me on the show right now. What would that person say to our listener here, Simon?
Well, it's very fortuitous, isn't it? So, look, this is, so we touched upon it a little earlier, and by the time, as you mentioned earlier in the show, when the podcast comes out, our new website rollout will be fixed. There's a small glitch in it. However, there is really no comparison. I mean, if you compare it, equity vols, we see with the VIX and spikes, it's, low teen handles, it's nothing terribly exciting. Even something like oil doesn't compare. So this is completely in a realm of its own. What other thing has a realized volatility that can get up to 200 and the implied vols getting into the order of 130? There's really nothing that has any semblance of liquidity that has that kind of volatility as well. So it seems like a very fruitful place to sort of get into. As we mentioned earlier, though, I think that as time goes on, the natural progression of things is such that the volatility will likely decline as the underlying becomes more liquid. But for now, there's really nothing that compares.
Yeah, I think the realized at around a 200 certainly stands out, especially when you're looking at major indices like the S&P that can get down to a 6% realized some days, so
yes.
Yeah, a Bitcoin realized vol. Granted, we haven't seen that in a little bit, but still, it has the potential. It can do it, Simon, which is interesting. So you're right, it is. A lot of times, like right now, it isn't that markedly different from a lot of the other major things you might want to look at, but it has those moments, it has those time frames when it could really become kind of its own beast. And like any volatility product, those are the moments where you probably want to pay special attention. You want to look at VIX when it's skyrocketing north, right? Not when it's languishing around 10 or 11. So these are kind of the interesting things. And again, I'm looking forward to when you start rolling out more of these indices, Simon, we could have a lot more to compare and contrast, including maybe to the Dairyland with the milkshake. All right, next up we've got, this is kind of a related question, Simon. This comes from Jan Thomas, maybe Jan. I'll go with Jan. Jan Thomas, why does Bitcoin have the impression out there that it is so volatile when it isn't really more volatile than your average volatile stock? Well, Simon, this kind of goes back to what you were just talking about, where it kind of has those moments, right, where it could print a 200 realized vol, which is impressive. Do you think that's what's really driven this perception? Like I said, the television shows make jokes about it now. It's just an accepted fact of life that Bitcoin is this monstrously volatile beast. Why do you think that is, Simon?
Well, I guess I have a slightly different take on it than Jan. I think the reality is, unless you're looking at really sort of mostly small cap stocks or things that are not terribly liquid, I don't think you get many stocks that will top the volatility that is experienced in the crypto space. So I think that might be kind of an overstatement. But look, it comes back to the fact that this is a nascent product. It's relatively illiquid compared to S&P 500 trading and options on the Nasdaq and so on. So look, I think it'll definitely come down. But I guess I would slightly disagree, and I would say that I think that Bitcoin is exceedingly volatile, maybe aside from a few very small stocks.
There you go. Simon taking the point counterpoint. Like I mentioned, we looked at the 30-day realized right now hovering around 60-odd%. So that's volatile, but not a ton. But like we mentioned with Simon with the realized vol index, it can get up there. And when it does, it gets going pretty quick. So that makes it a singularly intriguing and or volatile thing in and of itself. Convert wants to know, do we foresee any major players listing ETH options anytime soon? So I'm assuming Convert by major players, you mean your CMEs, your ICEs, those sorts of players out there. I've been bugging CME in particular about this for some time. It seemed like all indications they were giving to me over the course of the past year, it seems like they were leaning that way before they were leaning Bitcoin options. I know it seemed a little counterintuitive, but all the hints and internal things they were telling us was that they were probably looking, not an option, but looking to list an ETH future, maybe in the near future, pun intended again. And they had made some upgrades to those reference rates they were using to calculate that, and it seemed like they were more comfortable with that rather than listing the option on the Bitcoin futures, even though the Bitcoin futures were doing decent volume. So I was always pressing for the options on the Bitcoin futures. Maybe ICE jumping, or bakkt, I should say, maybe that helped force their hand a little bit, maybe a combination of a couple of different things. But either way, all of a sudden we're getting the Bitcoin options first, which I'm happy with. I'm excited about that. But I haven't heard any rumors of an ETH option. I don't know, Simon, you have your fingers on the pulse of a variety of different esoteric crypto players out there. Have you heard any rumors about ETH options coming our way anytime soon, sir?
I wish I could say the answer to that was yes, but no, I'm not on the pulse really with regards to that. And I have a feeling that the two major players are going to want to see growth in the Bitcoin space first before they venture out into the ETH. That's my opinion. I think that's probably still a little way away.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to obviously have some paper there. That's why I was surprised, and they were kind of hinting they were maybe going that way, 6-8 months, a year ago. It seemed like keep building the Bitcoin first. That seemed like the more sensible way to go. Maybe senior heads prevailed over there. Either way, that's what we're getting. So we can't be too upset. We're getting the Bitcoin options many of you have bugged me about for the last couple of years, ever since the futures launched. So we're getting those. Let's be happy with those. And then we'll start looking for ETH. If you want the ETH option I mentioned, there are places like Deribit and others. I know if you're in the U.S., that's a challenge, but there are places you can get access to those, as long as you don't mind the myriad hoops you have to jump through to access a lot of those platforms. All right, last but not least, we got Charles here, Charles Rivera. He wants to know, do Bitcoin options or volatility show any signs of bottoming out here? Well, Mr. Simon, you're the keeper of the Bitcoin vol, at least for today's program, sir. What do you have to say here for Charles? Are you seeing any hints, any signs through your BitVol index that maybe Bitcoin is, I'm assuming by bottoming out, he means not the volatility, but the actual Bitcoin underlying itself. Are you seeing any signs that maybe, obviously today's not so much, we're selling off more, but maybe in the near future, any signs that maybe we've seen a bit of a bottom here?
No, I don't think so. No, if we take a look at the history of the BITVOL index, I think the low has been around 43, and recently it's as high as 73 in terms of vol points. I don't see that there's any immediate reason why things should slow down or go down.
All right. Unfortunately, listeners and Charlie and everybody else, that music means we come to the end of our epic sojourn through the world of crypto. Let me just add to what Simon was saying. Yeah, we're looking here. We talked about some of the options paper we saw going up here this week in Bitcoin options land. None of that really shown. Well, there was that one large print for the calls. That notwithstanding, really, we saw a lot of put paper. We've seen the SKEW still kind of indicating it's a bias to the downside. So it doesn't seem like there's anything indicating, at least in the near term, that there's this momentous change coming. Of course, everyone's talking about having, well, that print happened a year ago, that bottom out, that was exactly almost a year and a half exactly from the halving point, which will come this May. So that's pretty much in line with what we've seen other cryptos do in that period leading up to their halving. So maybe if you're a buyer of such things, and maybe that halving could be the thing that turns things around. We have a lot of time to see between now and May. And of course, we'll have the options list and a lot of other fun stuff to sink our teeth into between now and May as well. And Simon, if our listeners are intrigued by your BitVol index or some of the other indices you guys are cranking out, or maybe they want to sink their teeth, pun intended, into a bit of a milkshake index, Simon, where should they go? What should they do?
Well, everybody should rush to see t3index.com, where we have the BitVol index, as we call it. And as you mentioned, we have some very interesting other types of indices, including the milkshake index, which is a measure of the volatility of the price of milk as traded on the NZ New Zealand Stock Exchange. So check it out. I
don't know if you really sink your teeth into a milkshake. Maybe if it's really thick, you could use your teeth if you got a nice scoop of ice cream in there. But check it out. And any hints you can leave us with, Simon, any time frame for when we might see these altcoin volatility products coming, sir?
Yeah, so the timeline on that is going to be sort of early in the new year, so probably January, sometime like that, middle of January. I think we'll be ready to do something.
Well, that's great. That's a lot of fun stuff hitting the crypto options and volatility space then in early January. Then, so that's not too far away at all. We'll have your new vol indices on some altcoin products. We're going to have, hopefully, the CME Bitcoin options listed out there. It's a lot of fun stuff to sink our teeth into. Hopefully, you're enjoying the Crypto Rundown program here. We're coming up on the end of the first year. It's hard to believe. We've been doing the show already for about a year. It's crazy how time flies when you're talking crypto. Clearly, you guys are enjoying it. Keep it up. If you like what you hear, of course, leave a review on your platform of choice. Help other new listeners continue to discover the program. We always love seeing new earlobes floating into the show there and checking it out and, of course, recommending it to their friends and everyone else. And on behalf of Simon and indeed myself, I want to thank all of you out there for downloading, streaming, subscribing, for, of course, sending in such great questions. Keep them coming. And we'll see you back here next week for more of the Crypto Rundown.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. The Options Insider Radio Network is sponsored by Fidelity Investments. Fidelity's Option Trade Builder tool can help you confidently build an options trade in 3 simple steps. Just choose a strategy, select a contract, and then review the benefits and risks of the trade. Learn more about Option Trade Builder at fidelity.com/options. Options trading entails significant risk and is not appropriate for all investors. Certain complex option strategies carry additional risk. Before trading options, contact Fidelity Investments by calling 800-544-5115 to receive a copy of the characteristics and risks of standardized options. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE SIPC.